forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March. For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk, and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Dace.
Greetings. Welcome to another episode of Bigger Ten. I am Steve Dace alongside my co-host, Aaron McIntyre. Good to see you, brother. How are you?
Doing well. How about yourself?
I'm doing good. The season that most of sports media right now is doing everything they can to not permit to happen draws nigh. In fact, at the time you and I are taping this, the date anyway, 60 days from today is the first college football game of the year. Again, unless Pat Forty, Pete Thamel, Dennis Dodd, basically every sports writer not named Clay Travis in America gets their way. It's fascinating to watch an industry. Maybe they don't even realize it. Who knows what the state of economic education in America is today? Maybe they don't realize that if there's not any sports, they're not going to have any jobs. Maybe they don't realize this. I don't know. Dennis Dodd in particular, I mean, that piece he had yesterday of panic porn, I talked to one epidemiologist in Illinois. Okay, first of all, why does his opinion matter over like the rest of the world? But we'll play along.
I mean,
one epidemiologist in Illinois says 3 to 7 college football players will die this year if we play. How many Premier League soccer players have died?
Apparently all of them.
Apparently they have. How many Korean baseball players have died? How many? Spain was the worst outbreak other than Lombardy, Italy in the West. Yeah, they're playing pro basketball. You know, because you're betting on it every night, right?
Well, not anymore. Their championship came and went. And
so the season's over. Okay.
Season's over.
Well, since you were betting that league every night,
none of them were dropping down during
how many lines went? Did you see a sudden line drop because guys just suddenly dropped dead from COVID-19? Did you see any of that? No. How about Bundesliga soccer in Germany? Anybody dying there? Do you know? Right. I mean, it's incredible to watch sports media. And I laugh because even though I'd be disappointed if we don't have sports this fall, I'm going to take some solace in the fact that they canceled themselves in the process. I'm claiming a win out of this either way, right? Okay. Either I'm watching football this fall or I'm watching all these guys lose their ass in their jobs for getting their way. Either way, I'm counting that a win. And I think here's the other thing too. I know this is Bigger Ten, not it just means more for the SEC. They're playing football in the SEC, folks. So, I mean, we can virtue signal and grip and pearl clutch up here, up north, all we want. I mean, can you even imagine if the only thing on this fall is SEC football all day, every Saturday? I'm watching every game if that's the case.
Oh, yeah. Bigger Ten will have to do an adopt a team
adopt an SEC team, yes.
Yeah,
we'll turn this in like the Big Ten fans' official guide into hating the SEC or the official viewership guide of the SEC.
I'm fine with that.
All right, so we did this with last week's episode. We did our daily or weekly top 5 on what I thought were the 5 most interesting coach quotes in the Athlon's College Football Preview as it pertained to the Big Ten West. So it's only fair that this week, Aaron, we do it for the Big Ten East, right?
That is correct.
All right. So let's go through these and let's begin with my beloved Michigan Wolverines. I have to tell you, I wondered if Jim Harbaugh himself was was sent like these quotes in, except he hates the media. So I know it wasn't him. But this assessment I just found as a Michigan fan to be, wow, that's way over the top glowing. But, okay.
One thing before we get into this, way deep into this too, I have found it really interesting. I don't know how much these quotes are verbatim / cleaned up or typed out. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Because I catch myself trying to read these in like Jeff Brom's voice or
which Pat coach uses that expression.
Exactly.
Yes.
And it's really hard to do. So that's one thing as we're going through this week's for our viewers and listeners, that might be a fun activity for you to do.
I think I know Pat Fitzgerald and Jim Harbaugh are pretty tight. So I could see this being Pat Fitzgerald doing a solid here. Anyway, let's share it with the audience.
All right, so this is about Michigan. It's crazy to think that they're judged on Ohio State because they've done a really fantastic job with the program and developing guys and recruiting. When you look across the position groups at the NFL talent, when you look at their development and their schemes, this is as complete a program as you would want.
There's some truth there. I mean, Michigan just had as many players drafted, or had more players drafted in the NFL a couple of months ago than any program other than LSU. Okay, I mean, he has sent a ton of guys. I want to say something like 94% of the guys that have started for Michigan on offense since he's been there have at least made an NFL training camp or some crazy number like that. And it ain't like they've been having, electrifying offenses with all that talent either. So there is some truth to that. And there is some truth to Ohio State kind of is the last remaining obstacle. I mean, he's 3-2 against Penn State. He's 3-2 against Michigan State. I mean, those aren't tremendous records, but they're winning records, right? Okay. Of course, he's 0-5 against Ohio State. But as a Michigan fan, I just categorically reject the idea that it's not fair to judge a Michigan coach by how he does against your biggest rival in the biggest game every single season. To me, I get to do that as a fan. I'm not even joking. Now, that's assuming that the movie theaters ever actually have first-run movies ever again. But this November, I already made a reservation, man. I'm going to see Kong versus Godzilla on the Saturday after Thanksgiving. I'm not watching another Ohio State-Michigan drubbing. I can't put myself through that again, all right? But I get to do that stuff as a fan, right? If you are the Michigan coach, you absolutely should be judged.
Yep.
In how you did against Ohio State. It's the grandest rivalry in the history of the game and one of them, or it is not. And so that strikes me as, let's give everybody a soccer ribbon sentiment right from the beginning. But the rest of that is fairly accurate, just maybe is a little too much mustard on the hot dog, but the overall sentiment, the analysis isn't terrible.
Yeah, so I think this is definitely an example of, I wouldn't say coach speak, but this is definitely a coach's perspective, and this is anonymous coach quotes, so this is definitely a perspective you're only going to get from a coach who sees things a little bit more holistically and sees things in terms of results of how the person actually does in their life and with their career after they leave your university. So I think that's some of what this is, but to the rest of us, who actually, pay for all those guys to have those scholarships and those coaches' salaries by going to the games, watching on TV, things of that nature. The rest of us, you're always going to judge your favorite team by how they perform against their most successful rival.
Right.
Most successful rival. So Minnesota is not going to be judged on how they do against Iowa, although they do still hate Iowa, or so I hear. They're probably going to be judged at the end of the day. How did you measure yourself up by the team to your east? How did you do against Wisconsin? And yes, Iowa has been great, but Wisconsin's been the big bear on the chunk of ice in this division for forever now. How did you do against Wisconsin? And when they start winning more, then that's when PJ Fleck is going to go down in history in Minnesota, I think, at least to some degree. And so it's always going to be, for all of us in the fan and pundit class, we can make our cases for how whatever coach who's moderately successful or very successful does, and whether or not that actually means they're a great or good or whatever coach. But really, the perception, what changes the perception the most is how you perform against your most successful rival.
Paul Chryst and Jim Harbaugh are pretty tight too. So maybe that came from him. Hell, maybe it came from Ryan Day, right? Ryan Day's like, hey, Jim Harbaugh's doing a great job, man. Keep him, keep him right there.
Yep.
Right there. No, I mean, we're so far ahead of them, it's not fair to be judged by us, right? Who knows? All right, Michigan State.
All right, here's the quote. This is the big unknown in the league. I think a lot of us have watched the hiring process from the outside, and it showed the program is desperate. Yikes. And there's probably more going on there with scandals in the NCAA than we know. Is this the Big Ten team you think is most affected by coronavirus? They haven't had any time on either side of the ball.
I think this is right on the money.
Yeah.
I wouldn't argue with a word of this. They clearly were desperate. They went back to Mel Tucker after he already turned them down, because then they got turned down by Luke Fickell at Cincinnati. You look at, even before we really had a coronavirus on our radar, we were looking at the late date of Mark D'Antonio quitting that job. The day before National Signing Day, if I recall, is when he stepped down, or right around then. That already puts you severely behind the 8 ball when it comes to developing a staff and everything else. And now you take the entire offseason away, where you're not connected to those players at all. You recruited not a single one of them. You bet I think they are behind the 8 ball. I would rate Michigan State amongst the most negatively impacted by coronavirus in the country, let alone in the Big Ten.
Yeah, I don't know if there's a whole heck of a lot more to be said, because that quote that I just read is basically the summation of a couple of, or 2 or 3 different shows that we did back in the early part of this year before all the bleep hit the fan, about what Michigan State is going through with the scandals. You don't know what's up next. They had to back up the Brinks truck for Mel Tucker, a guy with a really, really thin head coaching record. First, just coming where he's from with Colorado, and then just a thin coaching record in general. I mean, I guess you could say there's always upward mobility, when you hire somebody like that, but that's about the best thing you can say. And I don't really know what else there is to say.
He's got a tough gig. But you know what? Yeah. But he's getting paid well for it. So, you know what? There's a lot of things worse in this world than the word buyout, if you know what I'm saying.
Yep.
All right, let's get to the Buckeyes, who are right now, obviously, they're the standard bearer. They're the measuring stick in our league.
They're the favorite to win the conference and the national title, and it's for a very good reason. They're operating at the highest level. They're dominant in every phase of construction. They're still the gold standard on recruiting. Nothing has changed there. They're the prohibitive favorite to win it all. It's that or bust. And I don't really know what more you could say if you're Ohio State. Yeah.
Everything there is factual. And in some respects, I've with other teams I've rooted for, my Pistons at different times, with the Bad Boys or the teams, they went to the conference finals, I want to say 5 straight years. Those are the Richard Hamilton, Chauncey Billups teams. That's kind of a terrible position to be in as a fan, which is championship or bust, like the season was a failure, right? But on the other hand, it's a great position to be in as a fan, because it means your team has a sustained track record of elite achievement. That's what the new standard is. And I mean, they are the measuring stick that the rest of this league is measured by until further notice, no doubt.
Yeah, and I mean that's the type of position you want to be in if you're a fan of a team like that, right? You want to have the pressure on. I mean, that's a high standard, and that also means that you're doing stuff nationally as well, or at least you're in the running very late in the season to be able to make the college football playoff. I don't think it's overstating things. And of course, Buckeye fans are going to come on here, if we say, well, that's a disappointing season if they finish, 11-1, 10-2, but don't win the division. But that's true. That's the truth. There's no reason. There's no, barring an unfortunate series of injuries or something just otherworldly like that, on paper, there's no reason to say that the standard, the expectation, and anything other than that expectation of winning the Big Ten Conference again is expected. I
mean, think about this. It's hard to believe it's been that long. We are approaching 20 years ago Jim Tressel got hired, 2001. So this coming season will be 20 seasons since Tressel was hired. I think they went 7-4 his very first year. So in the last 20 years, I think Ohio State has one season when it didn't win at least 10 games. And that was the year that, they had the interim coach, Luke Fickell, when Tressel got fired for lying to the NCAA. And he was already on a historic win clip in the history of the Big Ten. And then they just got rid of him and ended up hiring a guy who's at an all-time historic win clip in the history of the sport, in Urban Meyer. I mean, think about that. I don't think they've won fewer than 10 games in going back to Tressel's first year, except for that one season with the interim coach, and that's in the last 20 years. And this is a different Big Ten than the Big Two and Little Eight that, Bo and Woody dominated in the 70s, where it was basically a season-long bye until they played one another, right? Every week you're playing teams that have huge amount of resources to invest in their programs, Purdue, Northwestern, Minnesota have state-of-the-art facilities that would have never even been contemplated at schools like that 30 to 40 years ago. Hell, you'd call up there at 9 a.m. on a Monday and you were lucky anybody answered the damn phone. All right. So it's just a different era, and still that level of success they have sustained. I hate myself because I'm starting to respect it now and not loathe it and despise it the way that I know as a Michigan fan that I should. And so the fact that I'm actually beginning to respect it makes me hate it even more, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, I'm there with you. I mean, I hate that that's happened to you, Steve. I just hate that I'm not there with Wisconsin yet. I still hate their ever. You
still just hate them? Yeah.
Yes, and there's no amount of logic or reasoning you can get through to me on that.
All right, I thought it would be fascinating, instead of, Penn State, Indiana, if we looked at a couple of the bottom feeders here in the East Division and found out what are their prospects for the future. So let's go to Maryland next.
This is about Maryland. You get the sense that they were willing to go out there and take their lumps last year, especially early. They tried a lot of stuff, and it was obviously rebuild mode to push culture instead of immediate results. It's going to take a while there. They run an attractive offense, and they're a better recruiting staff because they have SEC ties. They're still a season away from having to prove it on the field, especially as young as they are.
Now, I was a little surprised here with the idea that early in the year they were just throwing stuff out there to take their lumps.
No,
remember they got off to that great start.
Yeah, they won
the first couple of games. They scored like 100 some odd points. They were in the top 25.
They came out there agained Penn State and I'm like, oh boy, this could be an interesting game, and it was not.
Yeah, that was a Friday night. The week before they played, I want to say they were at Temple, and they had 2 chances to win that game. They got down to the goal line, got no points. That was considered a big upset at the time. And I remember that game because I was on the Owls in my picks that week. But remember, they got off to that huge opening 2 games and were ranked in the top 25. So I don't know that I buy into they were just throwing guys out there early in the year. I kind of think the exact opposite happened. I think everybody kind of bought in right away and liked the new energy, liked the new offense. They brought in Josh Jackson, the former starting quarterback at Virginia Tech, so they had a ready-made starting quarterback to go there. And then they hit some adversity early in the year after that great start against Temple, and then the wheels came off against Penn State, and that guy there with a 6-40 career record. That's right. That's not a misprint, by the way. 6-40 is now Mike Locksley's career record. I've never seen anything like that. 6-40. I think they got a little bit of adversity, and a guy with a 6-40 coaching record had no idea how to make the wheels on the bus go round and round. So they just kind of came off at that point. I don't think they were just throwing stuff out there early on at all. They were clearly going balls to the wall with that offense, lighting up scoreboards and making the top 25. He was trying to get to a bowl game last year. I just think when they hit adversity, he didn't know how to keep that team together.
Yeah, that quote really strikes me as pulling your punches a little bit when you're trying to be somewhat diplomatic, even though it's anonymous. Is that James
Franklin saying, "Hey, I just think Mike Locksley had to stay here at Maryland for the foreseeable future"?
It might be something like that, but the line that stuck out to me was they were trying a lot of stuff. That's okay. If you're a successful coach, I don't know if you recognize this, but I'm sure you do if you follow college football. If you're a successful coach, you're not successful by trying stuff. Mm-hmm. You have your identity. You do that, and it's my way or the highway. Square peg, round hole. Nope, I'm going to get me a square peg for my square hole, if you know what I mean. So that good coaches don't just try stuff. This was a way, I think, of saying something like, I have no idea what they're trying to do over there. I don't think
they were all over the place.
They were all over the place. Yeah. I don't know what's going on. It was a very diplomatic way of saying, I don't know what the hell is going on with Maryland.
What the hell is going on with Rutgers? Let's find out next.
All right. The Rutgers coach, or quote here. Greg Schiano is a New Jersey guy. It's the biggest reason he got the job back. It's a very different job than when he was there last. It's now a Big Ten job on the wrong side of the division split. It's going to be a long-term process, and it's uncharted territory. They were only ever relevant in the old Big East, and this is going to be way harder.
Yeah, you go to the old Big East there, And there were some good programs in that old Big East. Miami was in that old Big East for a while. Boston College has had a lot of success. Matt Ryan was, a Heisman Trophy candidate for BC when Greg Schiano last coached in the Big East Conference. West Virginia's had a couple of undefeated years under Don Nehlen back in that era, and then going into the Rich Rod era where they almost made it to the national championship game. So I mean, it's not like they were playing Little Sisters of the Poor every Saturday in that conference, but the physical wear and tear, the idea that you're in a division where 3 of the top 7 winningest programs in the entire history of this sport, and you have to play them every single week. And oh, by the way, they're in your recruiting footprint too. And so they go into your state and every single year take away a lot of the best players out of your state from you and then line them up against you in that same division. That's what makes it so much harder than when he was in the old Big East.
Yeah, and I don't think that's a surprise to anybody. I mean, we're not really breaking any huge news here that the Big Ten East is a little bit different than the old Big East. Having said that, though, I don't think that Schiano doesn't know that or didn't expect that either. I mean, after all, there's a picture of him coaching for the Buckeyes right there. He knows how difficult that division is, even as a coach on the coaching staff of the best team in the conference, which resides in that division. Here's where I would temper that quote a little bit. I mean, that's a really pessimistic overall. At least that's the impression that I got reading that. Really pessimistic. And of course, you're Rutgers. You should be pessimistic. It's just that he's had success at that school, and it's fertile recruiting area as well. So he could do something there. I don't know what those expectations should be. I don't know what the ceiling is for them in the next 5 to 6 years. But I don't know if I would be as over the top pessimistic. I just don't think I would be as pessimistic as that statement or that quote makes it out to be.
Provided you don't lose every single recruiting battle in your state to Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. You can lose most of them. But if you don't lose every single one and then you beat Wisconsin, Iowa, right, that next tier of teams that want to come to your state to recruit, if you can do that, there's enough players there, even in that division, if you've got the right non-conference schedule, that you could be what Indiana is right now. A 6-7 win team, and then if everything breaks right, maybe have an 8-4 kind of a season, particularly because we don't really know what the future of Michigan State football is. Keep in mind, growing up in Michigan, I'm quite familiar with the history of Michigan State football. Until Mark D'Antonio, Michigan State, going back to from Duffy Daugherty until Mark D'Antonio. So from about 1968 until D'Antonio really started establishing his program in East Lansing around 2008, 2009. So that's, 40 years. For that entire generation, Michigan State was rise up every 5 years or so and win a Big Ten or challenge for it. The rest of the time, you're pretty much a 5-7 win team. That's pretty much what they were, right? So who's to say they won't go back to that again? Because for 40 years, that is what they were. And Mark D'Antonio, I don't think it's a coincidence, just happened to stop that trend of mediocrity right when Michigan was in a place administratively where it was a mess like it hadn't been in 50 years, right? So I don't know that Rutgers couldn't be the 4th team in the Big Ten East. I don't know that they could not be. I wouldn't predict it, but I also don't think that it's an automatic. It could never happen, though, either. I wouldn't say that either.
Agreed.
All right, we'll come back and get to our weekly game of Big Ten Would You Rather next.
Bigger Ten is brought to you by Michigan Podcast. If you like what you're hearing today and would like to support us, head on over to Patreon, patreon.com/Michigan Podcast, where if you live somewhere where sports wagering is illegal, you can find Steve's picks for various games for just $5 a month. In the process, you can say thank you for creating this podcast on YouTube or via podcast, wherever you listen. Patreon.com/Michigan Podcast.
It is time here on Bigger Ten for our weekly game of Would You Rather. And Aaron, you get to go first. Would you rather be Penn State trying to finally make the college football playoff for the first time, or Indiana trying to get to 9 wins this fall for the first time since 1967? That's their last Rose Bowl team. So that's kind of which of these two programs trying to take the next step. I'm asking it in a way this is a way of me asking you, which of these two programs is in the best position to take that next step this fall?
Oh, best position to take that next step. I'm going to say this is actually a really good one because at first I came at this from the angle of, well, I would rather make the college football playoff. But if you're saying which one is in the best position, I'm going to say Penn State just by a hair. Just by a hair. I think, again, James Franklin last year, he coached his hair off, and he doesn't even have any hair. And so, I think he has the ability to make a lot out of nothing. Now, having said that, and I've been on the record before saying I think they got a lot of things to go their way that may not go their way this year, but I still think they recruit at a level that they have, if the ball bounces the right way, they're at that level where they could just have the ball bouncing the right way a few times this season and be in a very, very good position come the Saturday after Thanksgiving or whenever their last game is, to be able to be in position to vie for a Big Ten championship, and then, of course, the college football playoff. With Indiana, there's still, they have weapons. They definitely have weapons, especially on the offensive side of the ball. They still have to have a lot of things, a lot more things go right, especially in that division, to get to 9 wins. So I think it's Penn State by a hair. I'm still riding with them, but it's a lot closer. Again, with the actual goals you set out in front there, that's a lot closer, I think, with Penn State than it is Indiana.
Something to keep in mind: the week after Penn State hosts Ohio State in the whiteout, they go on the road to Bloomington and play Indiana.
Sleepy Bloomington,
man. Yeah. All right. And something else to keep in mind. I have been very, very bullish on Penn State for this coming season. Now, I haven't finished my preview yet because I still don't know what the schedule is going to look like or anything else with everything going on with COVID. But this stat has given me big time pause. And this as a sports bettor, why? Because this is the kind of stat that the next year always comes back and bites you in the ass. Last year, Penn State won 7 games, Aaron, when they were outgained.
Oh, yeah.
7 games last year when they were outgained. That is a little bit like, the old Phil Steele's turnover equals turnaround article that I think he still does. But if you're plus 15 in turnovers one year, you're probably going to be minus 2 or 3 the next. And if you're minus 8 one year, you're probably going to be plus 15 the next, right? That is a stat that just screams regression to the mean.
Yep.
7 wins when you were outgained. That has given me cause for pause on my Penn State bullishness.
Yeah, I hear you there, and that's kind of what I'm alluding to. With, he coached his butt off last year, James Franklin, but still, the margin that they won some of those games by. I think of the Michigan game.
That's one of the games they won by being outgained. Yep.
Goodness gracious, that was they were lucky.
Outgained in the Iowa game.
Yeah, and
they won that one. Yep.
Yeah. So there's a lot of things that went right for them last year. Again, that ball bouncing a few times the right way. That's the difference a lot of the times. This one's for you. Would you rather have 90% of your team test positive for COVID-19 now, but have your star player test positive later, or the inverse?
Well, I believe in science, so I believe in herd immunity. So I'd rather have 90% of my team test positive right now. That's an absolute no-brainer. No-brainer. Because there's not going to be a vaccine by football season, and there's higher odds that there will ever be, or there will never be a vaccine than we'll have one by next football season in 2021. When you look at the history and efficacy of vaccines, you look at trying to have vaccines for SARS viruses, the first SARS virus, they never could develop one. They spent 12 years trying it and then finally gave up. So there's 2 ways to do this. One is inoculation or vaccination to use medicine to get people to herd immunity, right? That's one way. But what did we do for thousands of years? Why didn't the Black Plague that killed 40%, had a CFR of about 43%, how did humanity learn to survive it? Because we didn't have antibiotics until 10 years after the Spanish flu, let alone vaccinations. Old-fashioned herd immunity. So I'd much rather have 90% of my team testing positive right now. No brainer.
Understood.
All right, one more for you. Would you rather take over for a future Hall of Famer like Mark D'Antonio, or be a coach with a 6-40 career record like Mike Locksley? What is more difficult history to overcome? Taking over for a legendary coach at a school, or your own lack of success? Which one?
Mike Locksley. Dapo Swinney, anybody? I mean, didn't he have a terrible record? You know, his first few seasons or
wasn't
terrible.
6-40.
It was, it wasn't 6-40. You know, I just think, again, I know you hate this.
Mike Krzyzewski's a good analogy to what you're talking about. His record his first few years was not good.
Bigger 10 is the fastest growing show on YouTube.
I hate that.
All right, yes. you only have anywhere you only have up to go.
Right.
Okay. When you're 6-40, especially at a specific place like Maryland, where they're not really used to having.
On the other hand, you have only one place to go the other way, and that's down at Michigan State.
But basically, I mean, it's a lot. Your built-in expectations when you take over for a D'Antonio are going to be a heck of a lot higher than they are for Mike Locksley. So I'm going with Mike Locksley.
Fair enough.
All right, last one for you. Would you rather have an updated NCAA football game, so just new graphics, new stadiums, or a completely new one with all the control schemes and features of Madden?
That's a great question.
See, I'm totally old man yells at cloud here. I just give me an updated version. Just give me an updated version, new graphics, all the updated stadiums and things like that, same control functions and things like that. I cannot stand the Madden controls because they're inferior to NCAA Football 14. I can throw guys open on NCAA Football 14. I cannot do that in Madden.
Yeah, you're right
if I see somebody breaking to open field, okay, real life quarterback Patrick Mahomes is going to throw there before the guy even reaches the spot.
Yeah.
If he's not actually at that spot by the time that you throw it, it's picked off every single time. So I like the old controls better. Just give me an updated one. This is the mistake that they made with Battlefront, Star Wars Battlefront. Just reskin it, update the graphics, give me Star Wars Battlefront 2. I'm going to step down off of my soapbox now because this one was designed for you, but go ahead.
I mean, you may have answered the question for me. I mean, I love the look of Madden the last few years. The look of it is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And so to see that applied to a college football game, I'd love to see that too. So, you know what, man? But in the end, I like playing the game, so I like the superior functionality. How about we just make it look like the new Madden with the old game's functionality? Why don't we just do that?
I'm good with that.
Yeah. I think we could just have the best of both worlds, right? Yeah. It's 2020, man. I mean, we're hiding from a cold virus. That's what a coronavirus is. It's a cold virus. We're hiding out from a novel cold virus, right? There hasn't been a movie opening in America in 3.5 months. You can't take your kid to the damn park, okay? But you can riot and protest. I mean, these are progressive, enlightened times. There's no way they could not create a game for me that gives me the new school look with the old school functionality. I don't think that's too much to ask. I mean, look at this utopia that we are embarking upon as we speak, my friend, right?
Yeah, another Korean baseball player just died, by the way.
We'll come back and wrap things up here in a moment. This week's Twitter poll, we asked you, do you think Michigan and Ohio State will end up playing their non-conference games out west this September? Overwhelmingly, the answer was no. 75% saying no. Now, I talked to Kyle Lamb, who's a big Buckeye guy, for Locked On Buckeyes earlier this week. He says Ohio State absolutely is planning on going out and playing at Oregon in the second week of the season. I don't think there's much of any chance Michigan is opening the season at Washington. It would be one thing if it was week 2 or 3 and you went through a trial run of, you know, what your procedures and policies are going to be like and testing and everything else. But to have that very first game be halfway across the country and you got to do this all portable and remote, I don't think there's much of a chance Michigan will do it. And I will still be surprised if Ohio State plays that game too, by the way. Just my own thoughts. This week's question of the week from Scott. If there's so many lawsuits associated with bringing back college sports, how come there haven't been all kinds of lawsuits since bringing back high school sports in Iowa 3 weeks ago? Scott, why does he hate? I think the only answer to this question is, why does Scott hate old people?
Exactly.
That's the only answer. I think we all know what the answer to that question is. Yeah. Why is Scott a science denier? Do you know?
I'm speechless. I'm just speechless.
Scott, you should have labeled your note. Scott, science denying ageist.
Is this the first virus or pandemic in history? I remember the H1N1 thing back in 2009 or whenever that was, and obviously, at least it seems not as big of a deal as this one is by orders of magnitude. I've never heard of places, peoples, entities being held negligent for a virus.
Neither have I.
Until this one.
Yeah, I don't. I
just, and that was like right away.
All I know is the odds of us getting our way of life back come November 4th are very high. And I'm just holding out for that at this point.
Yep.
That'll do it for this week's edition of Bigger 10. Don't forget, you can subscribe to the podcast. And if you do, smash that subscribe button and give us a 5-star review. We would certainly appreciate all of you to do that. You can like and subscribe here on our YouTube channel and like the video and share it with others as well. Thank you. For those of you, we're approaching what is almost 11,000 subscribers now on YouTube. So let's keep those coming. Thank you very much. Back at it again next week right here. For Aaron McIntyre, I'm Steve Days. He's Aaron McIntyre. We'll see you next week here on Bigger 10.